They had been riding for what seemed like days to William. Since they left the outskirts of the city, there was less and less to see in the countryside, just miles of nothingness. There was a silence about the area, a deathly, almost suffocating void of sound that William's company was doing nothing to fix. Solomon had kept to himself the closer they got to Barnaby, just staring out the window like he was in a trance. Any attempt William made to converse was thrown out the instant Solomon refused to look past the window. It made William uncomfortable. Should he have taken the man's offer for a ride? William had to look to see if the sound was really coming from where he thought it was. Yep, Solomon was speaking as if on cue. "You still never told me why you're going to Barnaby as well, Mr. Taylor." That uneasiness was sinking in again, this time more intense. William was cut off. "In fact, if I were a lesser man, I'd say you've been purposefully quiet about it, like you're trying to hide something from the man who's shown you such welcoming sincerity. Do you think I was obligated to take you here for free, might I remind you? Do you think you deserve such hospitality?" William froze in place, his cheeks flushed. Where was all this coming from? Sir, I can assure you with every fiber in my body that I am not taking this or you for granted, he began, hands out. It's just the matter of my business is personal, that's all. I'm very nervous to speak about it. Solomon leaned towards William, his eyes burning into the man's being. I do believe I've earned that explanation. Please don't make me ask again. The air in the carriage grew rather cold as the two men stared at each other. What was William supposed to say? "Oh, don't worry, I'm just here to kill the man responsible for the murders of my friends. I'm planning on shooting a supposed god right between the eyes." His fingers twitched as ideas rushed through his mind, trying to pluck the right one from thin air. Solomon just kept looking at him, as if to try and pry the answer out himself. "My grandparents had a home here," William blurted out. "They lived right in the heart of Barnaby before, well, you know what happened." Solomon nodded. "Since everyone was in a rush to leave, my grandparents had left a family heirloom in the basement of theirs. A sword." William was almost impressed with himself. A sword? Solomon licked at his lips, his tension seeming to simmer down ever so slightly. Why did they never come back? Why not your parents? William rolled his eyes. What was with all of these questions? He almost missed the quiet Solomon. "It pains me to say this, Solomon, but my family, my father included, were a very suspicious lot. None would step foot in Barnaby, not after the supposed curse." It surprised him just how good of a story weaver he was sometimes. "My father's on his deathbed as we speak, and he asked me to be brave enough to bring the sword back home, to him." Solomon visibly relaxed even more so, shoulders slumping as he pressed his back against the seat once again. "I'm terribly sorry, William. It must seem like I'm very ill-mannered. Here's to your journey. May it be successful." He tipped his hat, William nodding in reply. "Since you asked me, though," William began, feeling the carriage slowing down, "I am curious as to why you're going up this way. Someone with your appearance doesn't strike me as a thrill-seeker." Solomon grinned, pearly white teeth practically glistening in the light. "I'm here to meet my lord, my king. He is to take me to his kingdom this very evening." William blinked, mouth agape. His knuckles turned white as he clenched them against his pant legs. Was this man joking? He should have expected Solomon to be a lunatic. Just his luck. Before the information could be fully processed, the carriage came to a complete stop, almost sending William off his seat. The door swung open and two meaty hands came in, an ugly man staring them both down. "Oi, welcome to Barnaby. The Lord will see you now." Sable, Episode 8, Null. Venti Carpatio was always a very sheepish woman, which was why it was so surprising when she was given the title of Magister. They were supposed to be leaders of the theatermen, great tacticians and forces to be reckoned with. All definitions you wouldn't use to describe Venti. Who would be intimidated by a scrawny, slouched-over woman with a hooked nose? How many people had cowered in fear when they saw her hiking her thick-rimmed glasses further up her face? Well, Venti wasn't still alive because she was a gentle flower. None wanted to admit it, but most of the other Magisters had always feared Venti. There were even those that wondered if she wasn't the one pulling all the strings. Now, no one thought that, because all of the theatermen, her dearest friends, laid before her, burnt to a crisp. "Who did this?" she asked, her eyes transfixed on the husks before her. So many lives lost, so many young ones at that. She had already seen the damage done inside the Magister's chambers, the sight making her almost vomit. "I was hoping to ask you the same thing, ma'am," a voice called in the distance, getting closer. It was a man, tall with red hair, wearing the oddest-looking armor Venti had ever seen. It was smooth silver, barely any gaps in the suit, and etched into the chest was a name, Arno. The two had met after Arno had some questions regarding the theatermen, questions only Venti would be able to answer. "Though I do have my suspicions as to what caused this." Venti looked around the main hall, still trying to put thoughts to words. "I'd love to hear your suspicions, Master Arno." She gasped as Arno appeared beside her, pulling out a plate of glass and putting it before her. "Watch this," Arno stated, the glass beginning to show images to the both of them. They were, for a lack of a better word, horrific. One showed a city burning to the ground while another loomed over it, flipped upside down. The next looked like it was in a desert. There was a small group of people literally melting away, molted skin splattering against the sand beneath them. The third was probably the most ghastly. It was a small village, or at least it used to be, most of the buildings having been blown away or burnt. Things were pouring from the soil beneath, and though she didn't want to admit it at first, she couldn't deny that it was bones poking out, almost like they were wrapping around the village. A man stood in between, nude from head to toe with paintings of red spires all over his form. "Boggs!" Venti brought a hand to her lips, trying to keep herself breathing as she watched the naked man scream and kick at the ground beneath him, seemingly unaware of the horrors around him. What's doing all this?" she managed to ask, the words clinging to her throat like glue. "We don't know yet," Arno answered simply, putting the sheet of glass back in one of his many pockets. "There are some theories going around, but the most we can determine is that it's a man with immense power," he continued. "There are checks and balances for these kinds of things, and to put it bluntly, what's going on is impossible. Your magic can do amazing things, but this completely destroys the rules of everything." He took a few steps into the main hall, surveying the place. "This person has been finding our checks and balances and destroying them one by one with the idea that it'll make him into a god. The more he destroys, the better the chances of creating incidents like the ones I just showed you. How many of these security measures do you have left?" Venti found herself asking, though horrified of what the answer might be. "As of right now, 2. Arno shook his head. "And the bastard's standing over top of one as we speak." "Is it true, though?" Venti muttered. "If there are no more of these things, will he become a god?" No words were spoken for a few good moments as Arno kicked the dirt and debris out of his way. He never even bothered to look over his shoulder as he spoke. The world would be gone before he found out. That's why the others and I are here, to prevent any unnecessary death. His shoulders slumped. "You don't have any way of finding out who attacked this place? I feel like our two disasters are somehow connected." Venti was about to shake her head before she started clapping her hands together. "Oh, Vestibule, you were a genius no matter what anyone said." Arno looked over towards her, confused. Venti held up a hand and raised her chin, whistling a particular tune into the dead air. Moments passed and nothing. She whistled again, louder this time. Come on, come on. Now there was a squeal in the distance, coming from what used to be the dining area. Rattling and clinking echoed through the ruins of Elder House before a green orb buzzed through the air, landing atop of Venti's shoulder. It chirped and gurgled as it rolled over and over on Venti, its singular red light moving this way and that. It's an oculum, Venti stated, as if that would be explanation enough for Arno. When she realized it wasn't, she huffed. Master Vestibule made this. It almost acts like your weird piece of glass. The red light here scans the entire floor it's on and allows someone like me to see what happened here in the past few days. She eyed the thing. I just hope it was working. As if on cue, the oculum bounced off of Venti's shoulder and landed softly onto the ground. It rolled about some more as the red light grew brighter and brighter, filling the room in its glow. The rays of light seemed to be warping and twisting in order to make images, but it seemed to be having difficulties. Things looked distorted at first, but it wasn't hard to tell that Venti and Arno were now looking in on what could have been the last day of the theatermen. Mages of all ages and cultures were right here, going about their daily tasks or just chatting. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. It almost would make one forget that they were standing in what was essentially a tomb at this point. Soon, the door leading into the main hall was opened, and all the mages stopped to look at the figures walking in. There were 3 of them, 2 dressed in flowing black cloaks, while the other, who was in between them, wore their street clothes. It was only moments before the scene erupted into chaos, the once tranquil mages now becoming blood-hungry, ripping at each other's hands, some even eating at their rivals' appendages. All the while the 3 stood in the middle, just watching, until all attackers dropped dead to the ground, blood staining the carpets. This was when the 3 figures began moving through the hall, biting the remaining hands off and storing them somewhere. Venti nor Arno could decipher where they were being placed, but neither figure was eating them. One, the man in street clothes, looked up to where the oculum must have been during that time. Arno raised an eyebrow as Venti dropped to the ground. Venti, what's wrong? Do you know this guy? You bastard! She screamed, slamming her hands to the ground. You fucking bastard! How could you do this? We trusted you! She slumped, head to the ground. I trusted you. Heretic! It seemed like the words disgusted Solomon as he spat them out. His eyes were wide, and he couldn't stop his damned shaking. How could this be? The cloaked man stood beside Kelvin and nodded. I speak the truth, my faithful servant. This man you rode with, whom you communed with, was coming to our holy home with the intent of killing me. Solomon glared at William, who just shrugged in response. Master! Solomon dropped to the ground, digging his fingers into the soil. Please forgive me. I knew something seemed strange, but I let my foolish heart get the better of me. The cloaked man shook his head, smiling. Solomon, your kind heart is one of the many features that makes you you, and I accept you for who you are. His expression turned to a snarl as he looked upon William, who was being held by 2 of his men. This one is known to be quite a slippery one indeed. William scoffed, though it was so painfully obvious that he was shaking in his boots. Come on, can the theatrics and let's just get the show on the road, huh? All around him, people gasped. Let's just get to the part where you kill me and pretend it was just. You're boring me to death here. Kelvin was about to lunge at the man, but his lord kept him still. No, not yet. William blinked. I won't give you that satisfaction. There are a few things on my agenda more important than sacrificing a whelp like yourself. A better place for you is in my dungeon, where you'll rot away until I've decided when you die. The guards began to move. But Kelvin, wouldn't you agree that a mage with burnt hands is still just as dangerous? There was a moment before Kelvin grinned, drawing his blade. Yeah. In fact, I would say they're more dangerous. So much vengeance coursing through them. Too much, in my opinion. The Lord smiled, nodding. This is why I keep him around. He's much more intelligent than I. Guards, kindly expose William Taylor's hands to the crowd, please. They responded in kind. Some gasped, some screamed, but Kelvin was on him like a vulture with prey. You dare come to my master's home? He gripped the one hand with his own, swinging the blade down upon William's wrists. Ka-thunk. It burrowed right in the middle, just barely breaking bones. Kelvin was enjoying this. He had to really work the blade out of the wound before he hacked again, this time the hand falling to the ground with a wet splat. William screamed out in pain, not given any time to recover before his other was taken away from him. 2 bloody stumps before him. The pain as they burned his wounds was so intense that he passed out, his body growing limp. Kelvin looked upon his work with pride before spitting to meet the gaze of his master. Your will be done, Kelvin called out, wiping his blade. Good. Now, throw him in the dungeon. And as for you, Solomon, he turned while the guards carted William away. You and I have work that needs to be done before I can bring paradise. Water dripped slowly down the walls in the corridor underneath the mansion of Barnaby. It looked like no one had been down here for many years, Solomon recounting the tale one of his friends had told him about this place. Supposedly the last person to be down here was a thief who invaded the home while chaos erupted on the streets above. They passed through the giant metal door that she must have cracked open. How much of this hall had she seen before hightailing it out of there? Solomon was here with his lord and Kelvin, and he still felt uneasy about the whole place. I'm hoping that I may be able to make your skills useful today, Solomon, his lord spoke, breaking their silence. Of course, lord. My hands are yours to do as you will. There was a nod. That's what I like to hear, Solomon. I need more men like you in my congregation, ones that are always willing to help. The dripping had stopped as they reached a pitch-black part of the hall. Kelvin rummaged through his belt and found his torch, quickly lighting it. A door blocks our path to freedom, and for the life of me I can't solve it. My hope is that you, with your wisdom of such things, will be able to help. Solomon nodded, feeling his heart skip as they stepped into the blackness. The ground felt different here, squishy yet metallic. Absolutely. I'm sure I'll be able to crack it in no time. He nodded, reassuring himself more than the two beside him. The walls here looked different now as well, seemingly made of thick tubes of metal that glistened barely in the light of the torch. What was all of this? There are things in this world that are bigger than you or I, Solomon, the cloaked man began as if answering Solomon's inner query. Creatures that keep us shackled, limit our potential. They are the ones that bring such pain and despair to our world. The air began to fill with a scent of oil and mold, and they have their fortresses underneath the very soil, churning out the power to rule over us all. It is my job to find every last one of them and crush them under my boots. I've been very successful so far, but this door confounds me. They came to a full stop. And that's why I need you. You're skilled in unlocking things, getting into places you were never meant to. What stood before the three was a giant iron door that seemed to tower over them. On the iron were a series of murals that were etched into the metal eons ago. They depicted great battles of men and creatures of some sort. It dumbfounded Solomon, his mouth agape. Solomon, the Lord loomed behind him. What are you waiting for? Get to work. Paradise awaits. Blood ran down his face, the dripping of crimson liquid against his chest causing him to stir. His vision was blurred, and there was a constant dull ringing in his ears. Where was he? He couldn't concentrate on the question long, his head pounding like a drum. Fuck. Everything burned as he scooted himself up against the wall. Moments passed before pain returned to his arms. His hands. They had been cut off just an hour before. The blackened stumps before him a reminder of the horror. Screams and curses wanted to pass through William's lips, but nothing would form, squeaks escaping his throat. There was another body in the cell with him, but this one wasn't breathing. The The corpse's fingers were broken to the point of bones poking out of the wounds. His neck was filled with puncture holes. From the broken bones? William didn't know. He didn't know a lot of things, but he did know that he needed to get out, and fast. He could hear voices down the hall just outside the dungeon door. The cloaked man and Solomon. How long before they got back here? It was then that he noticed something else in the cell. Not another body. A bag. Black as the night and seemingly filled to the brim. There was a smell that came with the bag. A putrid, rotting smell that almost made William gag. What was in there? He did his best to scoot towards the bag, trying his best to avoid the corpse beside him. Flies were buzzing around the thing, and there was liquid pooling around it. Blood? It didn't matter. He brought his lips down around a bit of the bag, the rancid smell filling his nostrils. He pulled back, hearing the bag rip and tear away slowly. What have we here? Solomon asked as he stared at the door before him. He had noticed a little cap in the right corner of the door. Once he flipped it open, he saw buttons of all sizes and shapes blinking red and white in quick succession. Along with the buttons were several dials with foreign letters and symbols all around them. I've never seen anything like this before. He placed a hand just above the buttons. Very peculiar design indeed. Can you unlock it or not? Kelvin asked, doing horribly at masking his annoyance. The man had been staring at the door for an hour with no sign of improvement. Solomon looked over his shoulder and nodded. Whether I can or not's not the question, it's when I figure it out. He bit his lips. Was there a humming sound? Probably just his imagination. These dials and these buttons are connected, but since I don't know the language, it's not that simple. He winced. The sound was getting louder, though it seemed like Kelvin and the cloaked man were oblivious. Besides, I doubt that if I make the wrong sequence, there's not going to be any repercussions. This place is probably littered with traps. Solomon's head popped like a grape as a beam of light erupted from the door. His corpse sat upright for just one moment longer before falling flat to the ground, blood pouring from his wound. Kelvin drew his blade as another beam shot out, ripping him in half, both pieces not landing far from Solomon. Kelvin! The Lord shouted before a third busted through the door, nearly ripping it in two. He couldn't get out of the way fast enough, the beam pushing right through his chest, burning him from the inside out. The pain was overwhelming, his breath haggard and sharp. The door soon hissed open, fog pouring from the new opening. 5 figures in silver armor walked out from the other side, all of them holding what looked like rifles, though none that seemed recognizable to the cloaked man. One stepped towards him, covering him in shadow. Blood spilled from his mouth, his body twitching helplessly underneath this armored creature. His words, or lack thereof, were cut short by the barrel of the figure's rifle being shoved into his mouth. Shh. The armored man brought his free hand to his helmet. It looks like it's hard to talk. The humming filled the air again. Besides, you don't have anything I fucking want to hear. A pull of the trigger, and soon the cloaked man's head was gone, nothing remaining but the teeth stuck into the barrel of the rifle. Guess they weren't expecting that, huh? One figure proclaimed, placing their rifle behind their back. Dumb fucks. Don't get too excited, are ya? Another called out. We still have all their followers up there. They may not have our weaponry, but there's a certain strength in numbers. All of them nodded. Hey, Kane, call it into Arno. I'm sure he'll shit himself when he hears this. Kane, the man who had shot the cloaked figure, nodded, pressing a hand to his helmet, a wave of static filling the air. Arno, this is Kane of Delta Squad. We're reporting the death of Suspect 54B. Repeat, the suspect is down and out. There was no response. Arno, do you read? Not one, a voice cried out on the other end. One. Kane tilted his head, fingers turning the signal on his helmet. Arno, I can't understand. Can you repeat that? Arno shook as he brought the radio up to his lips again. That guy wasn't the right one. What? We thought he was pulling all the strings, but there was a third party involved. Someone who was barking out all the orders. Kane tensed, his heart pounding. You mean we killed the wrong guy? The man you killed was someone named Patrick O'Hare. He was some fucking general store owner in New York. Arno heard something behind him, readying his gun. He wasn't the brains of the operation, just a pawn in disguise. Everyone behind Kane had been listening the entire time, an unease filling the air. Sir? Kane's voice cracked. Who's our target, then? Arno paused. His name's... Someone tapped him on the shoulder, making him jump. When his eyes fell upon who it was, he gasped. There, beside him, was Venti, a cruel smile on her face. Shh, don't spoil the surprise, she hissed, cradling a shovel in her dainty hands. It's no fun that way. Arno gulped, bringing his gun from the holster. What are you doing, Venti? She giggled, bringing the shovel above her head. My master sends his regards. Her eyes opened wide. And I'm just the welcoming party. Kane fell to the ground as he heard Arno getting his head caved in by a shovel. The metallic clang mixing with the wet slaps of flesh made his stomach churn. He had never heard anyone scream as loud as Arno had. It wasn't long before there was silence again, a faint huffing of a woman heard in the background. Hello? He screamed out. If you're still there, pick up the fucking radio. A moment passed. Null consumes all, and all belongs to Null. Before Kane could scream, Venti had crushed the radio, static filling everyone's ears. Steps echoed throughout the hallway, cutting the silence like a knife. All 5 soldiers looked out into the blackened stretch of the hall, the steps growing louder and louder. Null consumes all. One of them screamed as he lunged towards another, fingers digging into their armor, trying to pry it off. Kane turned about and quickly fired at the crazed soldier, bringing him to the ground. Null consumes all. Another belted out, grabbing a nearby member and punching at their helmet until blood and gore poured out from the cracks, the corpse slapping against the ground. The steps were just feet away at this point. Null consumes all. The soldier who had almost had her armor ripped off pulled out her gun and shot Kane right in the leg, clearly cutting it off. She then brought the barrel under her own chin, pulling the trigger. No! Kane stumbled before falling, almost shattering his helmet. The steps stopped right before him, a figure covering him in its shadow. He reached for his helmet, pulling it off to look his death right in the face. William Taylor stood over him, a limp hand between his lips that he chewed at, ripping rotten skin and meat off before swallowing. He dug into his pocket, lighting a cigarette with one hand and keeping the stick between his newly formed fingers. So sorry to keep you waiting, he remarked, looking at his work. Thanks for opening the door for me, though. Kane stared dumbfounded, no words escaping him. Now, William began, blowing smoke in Kane's face. Let's start the end of the world, huh? Sable was written and narrated by me, Lane Lloyd. If you'd like to follow the show or just follow my antics, you can always find me on Twitter at @the_Lane Lloyd. That's LANELLOYD. Sable's theme song, Unfamiliar Places, was written and performed by Alex Langford and Trevor Eilers, and you can find a link to the song in the show notes below. Guys, we have iTunes, we have Stitcher, we have Google Play, we have a website that I'm still working on. I'm so sorry. It's taking me forever, and I don't think there's a good reason for it to be taking as long as it is. But hey, there are a lot of ways to not only listen to the show, but keep up with the show. So now that I've told you that secret, why don't you share that secret with other people? And you should also comment and like and favorite and retweet and whatever. Blah, 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 blah. Basically, spread the word, you dirty fucks. Come on. I always feel like I should have something planned out when I do this last part, and I never do it. So fuck it. Keep up with what I'm doing. So yeah, this was episode 8. There's only 2 more left in the season. Boy, that's That's weird. I didn't think I would be able to say that right now, but I guess here I am. And the amount of people listening right now is fucking bizarre. I have at the point of this recording that I'm doing right now, I'm at like almost 1,300 downloads in only 2 months, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I guess I'll keep doing it. But thank you so much, guys. This is fantastic. Like I said, I never thought I would even get this far. I didn't even think I would get past episode 2, to be honest with you. Much less episode 1. Episode 1 scared the fuck out of me. But okay, that's enough of me blabbering. I made my chair creak. Fuck. That's enough out of me until next week, with episode 9, which is, in my opinion, the darkest story I've written so far for this show, and that's saying something. Don't listen to it if you have a weak stomach. That's all I'm gonna say. So with that beautiful image in your mind, this has been Sable. I have been Lane Lloyd. I still think I'm currently Lane Boyd, but I'm Lane Boyd. I'm currently Lane Lloyd. Jesus fucking Christ. And have a good week. I never come up with something interesting to say. Bye. Just fucking go.